Okay, let the record reflect that the jury's back in the courtroom. This is case number 3007, State versus Lynlee Renick, day 2 of the trial. Hope you had a restful evening, great breakfast, good dinner, everything going okay. The bailiff tells me, I almost called him Mike, he told me that y'all were in a room eating breakfast this morning, and they had the TV on. And it showed, did anybody see that?
I didn't even know.
Anybody? You're not shaking your head no. This gentleman back here, you didn't see it, did you? Did anybody see it? Okay, well then I'm not going to go any further. All right? From now on, that TV down there is off. Okay? So, you didn't even know it was there? All right, great. Well then I have no further inquiry. Okay. Further evidence, I think we're on cross of your witness, correct?
I think that's correct.
All right, come on down here. And you will recall you're still under oath, okay?
Yes,
retake the stand. Okay, Mr. Hesseman, you may inquire on cross-examination.
Good morning, Mayor. Please the court. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You are Trooper Foust?
Correct.
And you're the first trooper to testify in this trial that was a full-time investigator on the Renick case. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. Well, Trooper Haslag, you're familiar with him?
I am.
He was not a full-time investigator on this case, correct?
It's a subjective term,
okay.
Full-time investigator on a case or not.
Well, he left, or most of his work was done the night of the crime, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And he was not the lead investigator?
Correct.
You were the lead investigator?
Yes.
Okay. And did you see him testify yesterday?
I did not.
Okay. And then there was a Trooper Edson. Are you familiar with him?
Edson, yes.
Okay. And he was not the lead investigator either?
He was not.
And he was not he did very little on this case, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And it's fair to say that this investigation was essentially 2 parts. You were on the Renick case as lead investigator from the time of the crime until the spring of 2019. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then you left the unit and had basically no further contact or communication with the DDCC from that point forward. I mean, until there was an arrest, you were not a part of the Troop F DDCC unit, correct?
I'm not going to disagree with what you're saying, but I'll make a little more sense.
Okay.
I'm still in Division of Drug and Crime Control. I never left.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Division of Drug and Crime Control, or DDCC. I left a component within DDCC to go to another component. So I'm still an investigator, just not in that Troop F unit like you're saying. Right. So I agree to that.
You left the Renick investigation before there was an arrest made.
Yes.
Now, I want to ask a couple of background questions. You've worked for the Highway Patrol since 2011, is that correct?
It is.
And you were a road patrol officer for about 7 years.
Yes.
Can you describe briefly what a road patrol officer does?
I think most people are probably familiar with, but to give a little more insight, every trooper in DDCC starts out, or whether you're a pilot or anything in the Highway Patrol, you start out as a road trooper. So you have to be a road trooper for at least 3 years, and that's the guys you see on the side of the highway, where crashes, write tickets, all that kind of thing.
And road troopers don't typically involve themselves in lengthy investigations, is that true?
Some do, but it is not typical.
Okay. And so that would have meant you were in the DDCC as a full-time criminal investigator for about a year or 2 years, as of 2017 when this happened.
When it happened in 2017, I was fairly new at DDCC, actually.
Okay. And I think you testified earlier at some point that there was about 4 investigators in your unit for 9 or 10 counties. Is that correct, in Missouri?
Correct. There's 4 investigators for, I think there's 13 that Troop F covers.
Okay. And you guys investigate a variety of crimes, not just homicides, correct?
That's correct. Mostly homicides and officer-involved shootings, but it's a variety of crimes.
Okay. And one of those counties is Cole County, right?
It is.
Okay, so in Jefferson City's in Cole County.
Correct.
So there's 4 of you for 10 counties in Missouri.
Roughly, yes.
All right, and so you were the lead investigator on the Renick investigation beginning on the early summer, June 8, 2017, correct?
Yes.
And you were, what are the responsibilities for the benefit of the jury of a lead investigator?
Lead investigator does a number of things, whether it's gather leads, have other investigators run those leads for you. You do those yourself, go through information, gather warrants. You run the investigation.
Okay. And would you describe this case as being, the Renick case, as being inactive at the end of 2017? At the beginning of 2018?
As being not active?
Inactive, like there were no arrests made and there was really no further leads being found?
No.
Okay. Did the case become inactive at all, at any point?
No.
It did not? What was, are you familiar with the term cold, a cold case?
Sure.
What's your understanding of what a cold case is?
I'd say you're out of leads at that time.
Okay. Did this case ever become cold?
No.
Okay. So I want to start and kind of give the jury an understanding of how this investigation unfolded. You were called to a crime scene in Montgomery County, Missouri on June 8th of 2017. Is that correct?
It is.
You got to, and you responded to a address, I think, 202 Highway RB in Montgomery County, New Florence.
Yes, for the sake of the argument, I think it's 240 is this facility.
Okay.
202 is a residence.
Okay.
Same property.
And you arrived there at about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, correct?
That's probably pretty close.
It was dark out?
It was dark. Sure.
And can you describe this place for the jury? Like just describe the surroundings and give a description of what this place looks like.
I can. You come off of a rural route RB, you turn onto a gravel drive. It's a large property. Off to the left sits a very large house. Back off the way a little bit. The first thing you come to is what we refer to, it is referred to as a snake facility. It's a one-story, well, there's a basement, but it's a one-story structure. It's not very big. There's a concrete drive right there for it, and you drive around that, and you come to where Ben and Lynlee lived in their second residence, and Sam Renick lived off in the larger house. To the left of that snake facility, there's a cornfield out in front of it. Faces Route RB. There's a pond off to the right on the snake facility.
Okay. And there were a couple of your unit is called the Division of Drug and Crime Control. Is that correct?
It is.
Okay. And I'm going to refer to it as the DDCC. And there were several DDCC members present by the time you got there, correct?
I don't know who got there first.
Okay. Well, if there were 4 of you that were there that night at various points, or all at the same, or all there eventually, and that was Trooper Koch. Is that correct?
Matt Cook.
Yeah. And then he was there?
Matt Cook was there, Ethan Ahern was there, Darren Haslag was there, and I was there.
Okay, 4 of you.
I'm pretty sure that's right.
Right.
And those weren't the Troop F unit, that's just Ethan, he's my lieutenant, he came to assist.
Okay, he's more of an administrator?
He is.
Okay. Now the other 3 of you, those were from your Troop F DDCC unit?
Correct.
And I think when you guys got there, you sort of took care of interviewing witnesses, and these other troopers, Matt Cook and Trooper Haslag, who testified yesterday, they more took care of processing the scene and looking for clues inside the facility. Is that true?
Fairly, we shared the duties. I think I helped do a diagram at the scene. That was after the interview, I think, and I helped Sergeant Matt Cook interview Sam and Lynlee.
You interviewed a man named William Philippek?
I did.
And who was he?
Will Philippek is a young man that would work for Ben. this may be kind of wrong, a couple times a month or maybe once a week, I don't remember now. And he would help with the larger snakes that were downstairs. He was an employee.
Okay, and he didn't give you any incriminating evidence about Lynlee Renick, correct?
He did not.
And he told you about a snake sale to the pro hockey player?
I think he did. I think he was maybe the first person that said something about that. I don't remember.
Okay, and then you interviewed Lynlee Renick, correct?
Correct.
And then after that, you interviewed Sam Renick, correct?
Correct.
And let me just back up a little bit. So while in those interviews with Sam and Lynlee took place at the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department, right?
Yes.
So you left that scene to interview them about 7 miles north of where Ben was found.
That's probably true.
In Montgomery
About
City,
7
downtown
miles.
Montgomery City.
Right.
And so while you left there, the other troopers went inside the facility. There was a search warrant, right?
Correct.
And that was executed.
Right.
And troopers took audio and video of the outside of the reptile house.
I believe they did.
And they then took audio and video of the inside of the facility.
We typically do videos of our scenes.
And they photographed and described the position of Ben's body, which they found. In which they found that position of Ben.
Okay.
Okay, and then they kind of documented the way his body was positioned and found on the ground. Is that, you recall reading that?
I'm sure I did at some point.
Okay, and so then they seized different pieces of evidence. They seized pieces of projectiles, which are the actual bullets. Is that true?
It is.
And they found, I think, 4 shells.
I don't remember the number of shells, 4 or 5, a handful.
Okay, so your testimony is that the troopers found 4 or 5 shells.
Yes.
Do you know how many bullets were fired in that facility?
I believe it was 8.
Okay, so that would have meant 4 were picked up and 4 were not picked up.
Right.
Okay. And there were also 3 divots found on the floor.
There were divots. I don't remember how many it was.
I'm sorry?
There were divots. I do not remember how many.
And then I think you and Trooper Cook made a diagram of the snake facility.
It was Matt and I, or it might have been Darren and I don't remember.
Okay. And Michael Humphrey was not there to be investigated that evening.
He was not there.
And neither was an individual named Brian Higginbotham.
No.
And neither was an individual named Jeff Arzola.
No.
Okay, so is it fair to say that the information I want to talk a little bit about the information you learned the night of this crime. You learned pretty soon that Ben was a successful reptile breeder and business person selling in that business.
I did.
And you learned that he had just sold snakes, so that he was in the process, that he had just struck a deal to sell a large portion of his steaks for a lot of money.
Correct.
And no one on that first night had any idea who killed Ben Renick.
Lynlee did.
Well, but as of that time, nobody gave you any evidence on that first night that Lynlee had done this.
Correct. No one told me.
Okay, so you had no information on 6/8 of 2017 that Lynlee was involved in this crime as of that date.
I don't know if I'd agree with that.
Okay. There was no forced entry. There were no doors that were broken or windows that were broken.
Correct.
And there was nothing that was noticed to be stolen or taken.
That's correct.
And I think you said that no one appeared that night to have any animosity towards Lynlee Renick, correct?
Correct.
And nobody reported that they thought she was faking her being hysterical or faking her grief or anything like that first night, correct?
Correct.
And in fact, when you interviewed Sam Renick, I think Sam Renick said that Lynlee was hysterical.
He may have.
And did you at some point tell Lynlee Renick that you saw her throwing up by the courthouse?
Maybe. I remember seeing it, so
Okay, well, what did you see? Can you describe what you saw?
I saw her throw up outside the courthouse.
When was that?
I don't remember. It was probably that night.
Okay. And you tested Lynlee Renick's hands for gunshot residue.
Say that again?
You tested Trooper Lynlee's hands for gunshot residue. You tested Lynlee's hands for gunshot residue.
Myself and Matt Cook did. It took place there at the interview.
Can you describe what that entails?
It's a simple process. It's a prepackaged deal with instructions on it, and you just take this little dauber and you move it around their hands, and it collects what may or may not be on their hands. You put it back in the box per the instructions, and it goes to the lab.
Okay, and gunpowder, is it fair to say that gunpowder particles are small?
Subjective.
Okay, well, some of the gunpowder particles are not visible to the naked eye, correct?
Probably not. It's probably a question for a person. From
Right. I mean, you could look at your hand and there could be gunpowder particles on there, and a person could not see the gunpowder, all of the gunpowder particles, correct?
I don't know.
All right. Did you document, and Lynlee agreed to have her hand swapped, right?
Right, I didn't forcibly.
All right. She just basically stuck out her hands and let you swap her hands.
Correct.
Did you document in any report that she seemed nervous about that, or that her mood or demeanor changed during the course of her hands being swapped?
I don't know.
That would have been something that would have stuck out in your mind, though, right?
If she was nervous?
Yeah.
She probably was nervous. She was in a sheriff's department speaking to an investigator.
Okay. Now, I want to talk now in the first about 10 days or so of the investigation. So that's the first night. I now want to talk about the day after, which I think was a Friday, June 9th, up until 6/19. Okay? So now the investigation kind of ramps up, and it basically begins the next day, correct?
Correct.
And several officers from the DDCC, Matt Cook and you and Trooper Haslag and some others, basically go out to Montgomery County, and you guys talk to all the people who may have some knowledge about this case.
We start talking to people the next day, that's correct.
Right. And while you're doing that, an autopsy on Ben is being performed in Columbia.
Right. We finished up early that morning, like at 6 or 7 in the morning or something. Went home and slept some. During the time we were asleep, we sent John Eric Etzen, to the autopsy, and slept a few hours, came back and started doing interviews and working up leads.
And you also reviewed the Montgomery County Sheriff's Department, or the Sheriff's deputies' evidence that they collected as well.
I don't know.
Well, there were also Montgomery deputies before your unit arrived.
Right.
Harley Alt was one of them.
Okay.
And Brian McGowan was also a deputy who was there. Does that sound familiar?
It does.
You reviewed those reports. They wrote reports about what they saw before you guys got there, and you reviewed those reports at some point. I mean, I would imagine you did.
At some point, I probably did. I'm sure I did.
And then you also listened to a 911 recording.
I did.
I'm sorry?
I did.
Okay. And so I think that the people that you start interviewing are people that were around the actual property where this took place. Is that true?
I did interview the people that live around the property.
Okay, so you interviewed the Amanda Lee and Gracie Harlan?
Correct.
Okay, and they were potential babysitters for Sam, and they were being interviewed because they were there when Sam received a phone call from Lynlee saying that she had found Ben.
Correct.
Okay, and you interviewed Catherine Fox.
I did.
She was the babysitter, correct?
Yes.
She was the actual full-time babysitter for the Renicks.
Correct.
And you interviewed Tony Powell and Alexandra Renick too, correct?
I don't know if I did or if somebody else did. I don't think I interviewed Tony.
Okay.
I don't really remember him.
Now, you also pretty soon interviewed a gentleman named Mike Scarlett, correct?
Correct.
And you interviewed him because a Montgomery County deputy interviewed him, and he had some information that you thought was important, and so you went out and interviewed him yourself, right?
I did.
And are you aware, you never interviewed a William Bomer, is that correct?
I don't recognize the name.
And you never interviewed a Caitlin Church, is that correct?
I don't think so.
Or a Marlene Drexler?
No.
Do you know if, one of the things you also did is you responded to tips. So if citizens called in a department with possible information on this case, you guys went out there and talked to them and ran down those leads, right?
Typically.
Okay, are you aware of ever getting a lead that a Brian Higginbotham might have been involved in this?
I don't remember.
Okay. Now, did you ever receive letters that Ben had previously written to Lynlee Renick?
Like a handwritten letter?
Yes.
From, I don't know, from where?
Stack of papers. Trooper, can you take a look at those and tell me if you've ever seen those before?
If I have, I don't remember them.
Okay. And what do those letters appear to be?
It's Ben saying how much he loved his wife.
Would you please review that document, Trooper? Have you reviewed it?
I read it.
What does that document appear to be?
It is a report taken by a sheriff's deputy about a week after the murder.
Doesn't that report indicate that there was information that a Caitlin Church believed that Brian Higginbotham might have had something to do with the homicide?
That's what it says.
Did you ever investigate that?
I don't remember.
Okay.
If I did, I didn't deem it important, apparently.
Okay. But you don't remember if you ever followed up on it at all?
I didn't write a report on it, so.
Okay. Now, you also talked to a friend of Ben's called Chris Phipps, correct?
Yes.
And you also then began to investigate Lynlee and Ben's finances, is that right?
It is.
And you reserved their Facebook information. You called the Facebook and you ordered their Facebook records.
I think Darren did, but we got their Facebook records.
And you investigated Sam, correct, and Sam's associates.
Yes.
And you also investigated sources of information that are common sources of relevant evidence for homicide cases, like you called pawn shops and gun shops and things like that to see if there was anybody who was buying a gun around that time.
Matt Cook did, yeah.
Okay, and then you also checked for any kind of surveillance. You also called ADT, I think, to see if there was any kind of surveillance information on who might have been there.
I called ADT, and Sergeant Matt Cook did area surveillance around the spa.
Okay. And at this point, you had already spoken with Lynlee. Okay, so after these 10 days pass, you had spoken with Lynlee, I think, twice by that point, right?
I think 3 or 4 times already.
Okay. And she had not given you any information that she was involved or anybody else was involved, right?
No, she did not.
Okay. But at that point, you still did not have any information that Ben and Lynlee's relationship was bad.
I don't remember what my first thing was that I came across to where I had a clue that their relationship was not good.
And in those 10 days, you still didn't know whether or not, you still had no information that Lynlee Renick was violent.
True.
Okay. And you still had no information that Lynlee Renick was anything other than legitimately hysterical when she found her husband.
Right. I mean, I agree that she was hysterical after finding her husband.
You talked to about, 15 people, and none of them gave you any information that she was not legitimately hysterical.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with
that. And there was still no evidence that Lynlee had ever fired a gun on that night?
On that day?
Yes.
Not to me.
Okay. And there were never any fingerprints on any of the shell casings that were recovered? There was not. Or DNA?
Correct. Well, Ben's DNA was on it, but that didn't benefit us, obviously.
Okay. Ben's DNA was on what?
Well, his blood was on it, the shell casings, because they were around him.
Okay, but that didn't
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Okay, that didn't tell you who killed him?
Correct.
Okay. Now, did you ever ask yourself why, and because some of the shells picked up, whoever did this didn't want the police to find shells, right? Is that a fair inference?
Correct.
Did you ever ask yourself why that person would not have found more shells?
I know why.
Okay. Those shells
because they were hard to find.
Well, wasn't there a shell lying right next to Ben's body?
I don't know if there's one right next to it. If there's one under his body, there was one that, when we realized the divots in the ground and the floor, we knew at that point we were going to be missing some. So I remember getting and finding one under the racks and having to get it out. It's a mess. There's like 3,000 snakes in there.
Okay. But somebody who fires 8 bullets and only picks up 4 would know that there's 4 remaining. That's simple math, though, right?
That is simple math.
Okay. And none of these people that you talked to in the first 10 days made any statements at all that they thought Lynlee was involved in this.
Correct.
And we touched on this yesterday, Trooper, but the sequence in which Ben was murdered was that Ben was first incapacitated while he was standing. And then when he fell, whoever shot him stopped firing, approached the body, and fired a number of shells directly downwards into his body. Is that true?
I would agree with that.
Okay, and this was all before he had a chance to run away or fight or anything like that.
Correct.
And we know that because he was lying in the puddle of blood. He hadn't staggered away and left a trail of blood somewhere else, right?
I would agree that he died right there.
Okay. And you had no information at that point that Lynlee Renick had ever been legitimately trained in shooting a gun. She may have held a gun once or twice in her life, but you had no information that anybody at that point had ever taught Lynlee how to fire a weapon.
In the first 10 days, I don't think I had any information that she had fired a gun. Okay. I may have asked her that first night, actually, if she had or not. It may be in my first report that she had.
Okay, but nobody told you that she ever had?
She might have told me. You can read my report from the night of June 8th. I might have asked her.
Okay.
I asked her at some point. I can't remember what she
Okay. At that point, in the 10 days, though, you never document that she was proficient in shooting a weapon, though.
No, I may have. I'm not saying I did, but if we read my first interview with her, I may have asked her that night.
Okay, I'm not asking about you asking her the question. Okay, I understand you may have asked her that question, but you didn't have any information. Can you tell the jury today who and when taught her how to fire a weapon?
She went to the range with Michael Humphrey, according to him.
According to Michael Humphrey, but you didn't know that in the first 10 days, right?
Right.
And this is Michael Humphrey we're talking about, right? Who gave you this information?
He told me that, correct.
Okay, the source of that information that she had training came from Michael Humphrey, right?
Yes, he told me
The
that.
person who just got a proffer agreement after he himself was convicted of first-degree murder. That's the source of your information.
The co-defendant in this case, yes.
Okay, and the gun that killed Ben was found in his possession, or he was the one that led you to the gun that killed Ben.
He did.
Okay. And he admitted to bringing the gun, right?
Not to the scene. He gave it to her at our spa.
He brought the gun, but that's what he says, I understand that. But he brought the gun to the scene, and then he left with the gun. Is that what happened? Isn't that what happened?
No. He brought it to her. He picked her up. They drove out there. So in the sense that he's conveying it because he's conveying her to the scene, and then he leaves with it, I'll agree to that.
How did you find the gun, ultimately?
Michael Humphrey.
And you interviewed, I'm going to hand you what I've marked Defense Exhibit A, Trooper. Can you tell the jury what that is?
This is a voluntary statement form, Montgomery County Sheriff's Office form that Mike Scarlett filled out for them, looks like the day after the murder.
Okay. Does that witness statement say that Mike Scarlett heard a muffled gunshot and then a scream?
Yes, it says, what I thought was a muffled shot sounded to me a shotgun when I heard it. Then after a few minutes, I heard some screaming.
Sorry, slow down, please.
I'm sorry.
Say that again.
I heard what I thought was a muffled shot. It sounded to me as a shotgun when I heard it. Then a few minutes, I heard some screaming, and it goes on from there.
Okay. Your Honor, I would move what I've marked Defense A into evidence.
Objection. Counsel, come up here. It's here. I think I need to say Defendant's Exhibit A
Yes.
is admitted. Okay, now you want,
Permission to publish, Your Honor?
yeah, you want document key. Wait a minute, hang on. Okay, it should be right down there. Is it on here? Okay.
Okay, so does that not say, Trooper, that it says at about 6 o'clock or a little before 6 or after 6, I heard what I thought was a muffled shot. It sounded to me like a shotgun when I heard it. Then after a few minutes, I heard screaming, and I know it's misspelled. Something bad had happened next door. And then I heard sirens coming down Highway RB. Is that what that says?
Correct.
Okay. And this homicide took place at about 4 or 4:30. Is that what you recall?
I think it was before then.
It was before 4:30?
Now I can't remember. I feel like it was 3:30 or 4:30.
Okay. You would admit, though, that the EMS coming to the scene after Lynlee called the police at about 6 was a separate or was about an hour or 2 hours after the homicide actually occurred, right?
So a little after, I think she called EMS around 6:30, 1 or 2.
And you didn't have any reports or have any knowledge of any other gunshots occurring that day in that area except for the gunshots that took place at 4 p.m. or around 4 p.m.?
Correct.
And when you interviewed Mike Scarlett, you interviewed him at his house?
I don't remember if I interviewed him at his house or on the phone.
Okay. Now, did you ever, in those 10 days, find out whether Ben ever collected the $1.2 million from the hockey player, Robin Layer, from his snakes?
He did not. I mean, Ben was dead.
And did you ever get any information that a Jeff Arzola was possibly involved as well?
I remember something because I remember having the DOR photo for a while, but I never interviewed him.
Did you do anything with that?
No.
And Ben died with no drugs in his system, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, I want to turn your attention to the next piece of this investigation, 619 through 10-5. This was when you began to look at closer at Lynlee Renick as a suspect in this case. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you have a conversation with her on 619 at Troop F?
Correct.
And she is evasive in that conversation?
Right, she didn't tell me everything that we know today.
Right. And that's when you find out that a Mike H came to her spa on that day, or on the day of the homicide.
That's when I learned of Mike H.
Okay.
I did not learn that day that he was at the spa on the day of the homicide. They were evasive about that.
Okay, and you made a mental note to go talk to him.
I did.
And you had a hard time contacting him.
I did.
And you interviewed, then you went to the spa, Lynlee's spa, on 6/22, is that correct?
Maybe. I don't remember the dates.
And you talked to an Ashley Shaw?
I did.
And you talked to her in your car?
I did.
And I think you wrote a report. She denied having any involvement, Ashley Shaw did?
Correct.
So she didn't say what she said yesterday. She didn't talk about, we went out there to kill Ben or anything like that.
Correct.
Okay, and you didn't document anything suspicious about what she said on 6/22.
Correct.
And then you interviewed, after you talked to Ashley, you interviewed Lynlee Renick that day, that morning in her spa while she was in the spa.
Correct.
Can you describe for the jury the layout of this spa?
Not well. I think I was only in there that one time. It's a foyer. Not well. A hallway, some rooms, another hallway. No.
And eventually you get in touch with Michael Humphrey in July
Correct.
17th. All right. And you examine Michael Humphrey's phone, correct?
I do.
And you learn that Michael Humphrey deals or gives methamphetamine to other people.
Correct.
And he admits to being an avid hunter.
I think we talked about hunting. I think we've talked about this before. I don't know if we agreed that he was an avid hunter, but I acquiesced that he used to hunt or liked to hunt.
Okay, with firearms.
Correct.
And he had hurt cats for entertainment.
Right. After you brought that up at the deposition, I went back and refreshed. Yeah, we talked about
And
shooting a cat.
when you were looking at his phone, you found information that he was using methamphetamine.
Yes.
Okay. That was after he said he wasn't using methamphetamine.
Right.
And he explained to you that a little pep rally, the message he sent to Lynlee, was referring to drugs.
Yes.
Okay. But there's no evidence that Lynlee knew that a pep rally was code for drugs or anything like that.
No, I guess not.
And Michael Humphrey told you that he has no job.
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
And he goes to the casino a lot.
Correct.
Trooper, I'm going to refer your attention to this. I think it's States 105. Can you see that okay?
It's not,
Oh, it's not?
Dude, hang on a second. I gotta get, this is already in?
Yes, All right, and that appears to be a thumbs up from Lynlee Renick's phone.
correct.
But it doesn't say who was actually holding her phone. The message, you can't tell from just the message who was actually holding her phone when this thumbs up was sent.
That's
Can you?
No, I cannot.
Okay. And after the thumbs up is sent, Michael Humphrey asks Lynlee what she's doing.
Yes.
Okay, he says, I was thinking about you on my way home, what are you up to? That's Michael Humphrey's response, right?
Correct.
And then the other response from Lynlee was, M was messing around on my phone and accidentally sent that, we are getting ready for bed. That's what it says after that, right?
Correct.
And then Michael Humphrey says, gotcha.
Correct.
And M, do you know who M is?
Her daughter.
Do you know how old her daughter is?
Today, no, I don't.
Okay, so you don't know at that time whether she was 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 or...
If I had to guess, she was,
Well, don't guess. I mean, if you don't know,
I said I didn't know, and
Okay.
you asked me again, so.
All right.
4 years old, I don't know.
4? Okay. And now I don't know if it is around, okay, so August is when you review the Facebook records, right?
That's what it says.
Okay, about August 1st.
Okay.
Does that sound right?
That's what it says. I'm not
Okay.
disagreeing. I don't remember.
And you reviewed all those Facebook records.
I did.
And some of those Facebook records from Lynlee to Ben were in all caps, and they accused Ben of basically trying to have sex with her when she was asleep.
Correct.
And that was from Lynlee to Ben.
Correct.
And do you recall reviewing a Facebook message in which Lynlee says she wants to go to therapy with Ben, or couples therapy? What?
I do.
Okay. And then you documented, then I think you also downloaded screenshots from Ben Renick's phone, messages between him and Lynlee.
Yes.
And some of those screenshots were of Ben being agitated or upset that Lynlee had not paid the bill on the spa.
Correct.
And that she was behind.
Correct.
But Ben's Facebook records do indicate that Ben is willing to leave the spa open for 3 more months to see where they're at, and if it makes a profit, he's going to agree to keep it open. Do you recall that?
I don't remember the timeline he gave her, but yes, I agree with that.
I'm going to refer your attention to the second to last paragraph there, Trooper. Those are the Facebook records that you downloaded yourself in this case, right?
They were the ones provided by Facebook, and then I copied them over to, basically, these are my notes. Okay. But yes.
Don't those notes indicate that Ben told Lynlee that he was going to keep the spa open if it made a profit?
Yes.
Okay. And did you happen to see when that message was sent to Lynlee?
I didn't look at the date. The day of the murder.
Okay. So the day of the murder, Ben told Lynlee Renick he was willing to leave the spa open for 3 months. Correct?
Correct.
And you also downloaded screenshots between Ben and Lynlee in which Lynlee and Ben are being affectionate towards each other around the time of the murder.
Yes.
Okay. And also, do you recall on June 7th, the day before the murder, Lynlee is asking about when the rat supplier is coming?
I do.
And that rat supplier would be somebody that comes into the facility and feeds these snakes, I guess, rats.
No, that's not how I understand it. I think they're mice.
Okay.
I may be wrong, but anyways, rodents. The rodent supplier. I think I don't know if Ben feeds them. He's just a supplier.
Okay. So you don't know if this rodent supplier was going to be the normal course of his duties were to come inside the facility or where he actually went?
That's correct.
Okay. So this Phil guy could have been coming to the house, he could have been coming in, you don't know when or what place he was usually supposed to report to.
I would guess he would go to the snake facility.
Okay, you guess, though you don't know for sure.
I don't.
I am going to mark this document as defense B. Can you take a look at that, Trooper, and tell me what that appears to be?
It is.
What are you marking it as?
A B.
Okay.
It's that's not what it's marked on my exhibit list, Your Honor, but I thought I would start over.
Huh? So we're not using this?
Well, I didn't want to add a bunch of letters and wanted to start over at the beginning of the alphabet, so it was more clear.
Okay, so we're not using your exhibit list.
Well, not for this exhibit.
Okay, well, I guess I'll make my own. Okay, so this is B, right?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so what does that appear to be?
It appears to be a picture of Benjamin Renick's phone.
All right. And what are those? What is on Benjamin Renick's phone?
A text conversation between him and his friend Chase Baker.
Okay. And what are those conversations appear to be about?
You want me to read it?
No, just describe what they appear to be about.
Food poisoning or poisoning.
Okay. And are those a fair and accurate depiction of the screenshots that you downloaded for this case?
Yeah, this is probably the picture.
Okay, Your Honor, I would move what I've marked B into evidence, and
Okay. Any objection? Okay, defendant's exhibit B is admitted. Are you going to put it on that thing?
yeah. Okay, now these are conversations on May 24th, right? 1:28 p.m. between Chase and Ben.
I need to look at the date. The top's cut off a little on the
I'm sorry?
screen.
Oh, it's cut off.
Yep.
Okay, Wednesday, May 24th?
Yes.
Okay, and these appear to be Chase and Ben being lighthearted. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Ben says, "I have a fun story" with 3 exclamation points.
Yes.
Or Chase, one of them. I'm not sure which one it was, but I think it...
On the right would be Ben.
Okay, he refers to this food poisoning as a fun story. Correct?
Right.
And does it not also say LMAO? Why would she do it to herself too? Does it not also say that?
It does.
And what does LMAO stand for?
Laugh my ass off.
And also on the screenshots of Ben's phone, do you recall a message from Ben in which he says that he talked to Robin last night and that Ben should get the $200,000 payment in today? Do you recall seeing that?
Vaguely.
So that would mean that Robin Layer, and Robin Layer was the hockey player?
Robin Leonard, yes.
And so that would indicate that Ben was telling Lynlee that a payment for those snakes, part of the $1.2 million, would be coming through that day.
I don't remember the day, but yes, I remembered a conversation about Robin should be paying soon or something.
Okay, and that was just around the time of the homicide or the day of the homicide?
Yes.
And at this point, you also had learned about affairs that Lynlee was having around this time period too, correct?
That's correct.
And the people that Lynlee was having affairs with, they also did not think that she had done this, or they gave statements to you indicating that they did not believe she had done this, correct?
That's correct.
And still at this time, you had not talked to Brian Higginbotham or Jeff Arzola, correct?
That's correct.
So, as of just before 10/5, the evidence that you have, just to kind of recap, is that Lynlee and Ben have a bad relationship. You know that by October, right?
Correct.
And you know that she's having multiple affairs, right?
Correct.
And you know that her and Ben had a big fight just before the murder, right?
Yes.
And that she was behind on payments from the spa.
Correct.
And you know that Ben and Lynlee, or that one or both of them were sick from a protein shake.
Correct.
Okay, but you had not learned any other information about the protein shake except for that at that point.
I believe that's correct.
Okay, and you had known, or you had seen messages that Michael Humphrey and Lynlee had met or had planned to meet on the day of the murder.
Correct.
And you also knew that Lynlee had been covering up her involvement in some way, or being evasive too, correct?
Yes.
But you also had evidence that Lynlee wanted to go to therapy, right?
Correct.
And you also knew that Lynlee displayed affection towards Ben on the day of the murder, or around that time, right? Or, I'm sorry, I'll rephrase the question. You had learned that time that on the day, or very close to the day of the murder, Lynlee had been affectionate towards Ben in text messages.
Like sending the naked pictures?
Well, just messages in general.
Yes.
Okay, she had said things like, I love you, and I'm excited, and things like that, right?
Right, they're excited for the date night.
Okay. And Ben had also told Lynlee that he was about to get another big payment on the snake sale.
Correct.
And nobody is still coming after about a month, or several months have gone by, to say that Lynlee had actually done this. Nobody's giving you any, no witnesses coming forward to with any specific incriminating information about that.
That's correct.
And also by that time, Lynlee had moved out in October of 2017 after this homicide had taken place, and she was living with her father.
That's correct.
And we still don't know by this time who Brian Higginbotham is, or who Jeff Arzola is, and what their involvement is.
That's correct.
So, and also by 10-5, you had pretty much looked at everything that was possible to look at. I think Master Sergeant Reynolds even says we looked at everything in a 10-5 interview. He says we've looked at all the evidence that's out there as of 10-5. Is that fair?
No.
Okay.
I agree that he said it.
I'm sorry?
I agree that he said that.
Okay. So, at around 10-5, October the 5th, you decide to have a heart-to-heart with Lynlee Renick in Troop F, correct?
Yes.
And this is an interrogation. You would agree with that?
I would.
This is not a let's follow up and talk like you had been doing. You're going to ask a very serious questions towards her.
Yes.
And there were 2 detectives or investigators that interrogated her on that day. It was you and a Master Sergeant Reynolds, right?
Correct.
And Reynolds says, we have done the investigation. We have looked at everything we can. Does that sound familiar?
He probably said that.
And do you recall him saying, and normally the first person to talk about what happened is the one that gets the deal? Okay, do you understand that? Do you recall him saying that?
I don't remember what he said.
I'm going to refer your attention to line 28 through 30 on that transcript. Can you please review that to yourself? Okay. Doesn't Reynolds tell Lynlee Renick, and normally the first person to talk about what happened is the one that gets the deal?
He did.
Now, you wouldn't give a deal to somebody that you believe is lying, right?
I wouldn't give a deal to someone who is lying.
Well, for a person to get a deal from the Highway Patrol, I mean, he's referring in there to some kind of, charges being dropped or some kind of preferential treatment. Isn't that what a deal is?
Yes.
And you wouldn't give a deal to somebody you didn't believe, right?
Right.
So to give somebody a deal, what Reynolds is saying is basically the first one to talk is the one who's going to be believed. Isn't that what he's saying?
Not the first one to be believed.
The first person to talk about what happened is the one that gets the deal. That's what he says.
You said 2 different things. The first person to be believed.
Well, let's sort this out.
What I'm saying, in answer to your question, is if they say something, I'm not automatically going to believe what they say.
Read line 29 through 31 to the jury.
Marcus Reynolds says, there's a team of investigators talking to other people right now that were involved in this. And normally the first person to talk about what happened is the one that gets the deal. Okay? Do you understand that?
Thank you. And that was Master Sergeant Reynolds to Lynlee Renick on 10-5. Correct?
Yes.
So basically, the order in which people report, well, I'll withdraw the question. And then I think in the course of this interview, you go through all of the evidence with Lynlee and you tell her all of the evidence you have against her. Is that correct?
I lay out quite a bit for her, yes.
Okay, you say, Lynlee, you and Ben had a horrible relationship, right?
Something to that effect, yes.
Okay, and Reynolds says that Ben was going to close the spot. That's what Reynolds says?
I don't remember what he said.
Okay. Would you read line 20 through 29 to yourself, please?
Okay.
Doesn't he say that the spa was about to close? Doesn't he say the money to keep that spa going because that was close or that was about to close?
He asked, was it because you needed money to keep your salon going?
Okay. And doesn't he also say that that was one of the most important things to you besides your kids? You wanted that spa? Doesn't he say that?
That's correct.
So that would indicate that the spa is really important, but the kids are just as important or more important than the spa. Isn't that what Reynolds is indicating there?
Yes.
And doesn't Reynolds say doesn't Reynolds also say that Ben was going to shut it down? He was going to pull the plug because it was pulling Renick Reptiles down. He was going to pull the plug on it. We know that. Isn't that what Reynolds also said?
I didn't read that far down.
I want to refer your attention to lines 4 through 6.
That is what he said.
Okay, but didn't you just testify that Ben sent Lynlee a text message indicating that he was going to keep the spa open for another 3 months?
I did.
So he wasn't going to shut it down at that point, right?
I was going to shut down in a few months.
Okay. If it didn't make a profit.
Right.
If it made a profit, it would stay open.
Correct.
And doesn't Reynolds also say that those 3 months had passed? He was going to pull the plug on it? Doesn't he also say that?
I don't know.
Thank you. I'll refer you to page 6, line 4 through 6. I'm sorry, page 6, line 15.
Yes, that's what he said.
So then you confront Lynlee about her affairs, right?
Yes.
And you confront her about being evasive about those affairs, right?
Correct.
And you tell her the spa was losing money and the spa was having financial troubles, right?
That's correct.
And then you also confronted her about her erasing Facebook messages, right?
I probably did.
Facebook messages of her and Ben fighting.
Correct.
And that she also had no more contact with Michael Humphrey after the murder.
Correct.
And then you talked to her about her wanting to know when the rodent supplier was coming.
Probably.
And then you also sort of imply that she's being deceptive towards Ben and not being forthcoming about her affairs and things like that with him.
Correct.
And then you also tell her that a meth dealer was coming to her salon or her spa. Correct? Michael Humphrey. Yeah.
Right.
But you have no evidence that Lynlee knew that Michael was selling meth or dealing meth, right? I mean, she didn't know what Michael Humphrey was doing. You have no evidence of her participating in a drug transaction or anything like that, right?
No.
And you don't bring up with her the scream after a muffled gunshot. You never discussed that with her.
Probably not, no.
Why didn't you raise that with her?
The timeline doesn't make sense. And why would she?
Well, I understand that Mike Scarlett said that it happened at 6, and the shots were at 4, but there were no shots at 6, right? There were no, as far as you know, there there were no gunshots at 6 o'clock p.m., right?
That's correct.
So Mike Scarlett could have been wrong about the times and he could have been describing the incident that took place at 4 o'clock, even though he said 6 o'clock.
Well, I also interviewed the person that was with him, Joe Rabbit, who said he didn't hear any gunshots.
Okay, but Joe Rabbit also said he was there at 6 o'clock.
I don't remember what time he said it was, but yeah.
But you never even raised the issue of a muffled gunshot and a scream shortly thereafter with Lynlee Renick.
No.
Okay. And you would agree that there was a gunshot that took place on that day?
There were several.
Yeah, all at the same time.
Correct.
So, I mean, if somebody heard a gunshot who was close by that day, they'd probably be correct, right?
Correct.
And if they heard the gunshot, they would probably be correct also about the scream that took place several minutes later.
At what time?
Well, what I'm trying to establish is if somebody is capable of hearing a gunshot, which you say happened, wouldn't they also be just as capable of hearing a scream that took place a couple of minutes later?
A gunshot's louder than a scream. I don't know.
Well, he said he heard a muffled gunshot, right?
Okay. Right.
Do you agree with me?
I agree that he said that, yes.
Okay. Now, so you say several times, I think, and I'm paraphrasing here, that you know she's involved, right?
Correct.
You know she's involved. You're not sure how. You say you're not sure exactly what happened, but I saw you throw up on the side of the courthouse, and I know you're involved, but I'm not sure how, and that you know a lot more than what you're telling me. Is that what you said to Lynlee?
I probably did.
Okay. And do you know what her response to that was?
No.
Can you please read line 26 to yourself?
Yes.
What is her response to that statement you made?
She says, I wanted a divorce.
So, you're accusing her of being involved, correct?
Yes.
And her response to your accusation of or your question of how she's involved is that she wanted a divorce, right?
That's correct.
Is that a change from her earlier statements in which she said she was never involved at all?
No.
Okay, but she's admitting to you that her involvement in this case has something to do with her wanting a divorce.
Correct.
And at the end of that interview, Lynlee Renick is not arrested.
That's correct.
She walks out of that interview room.
She does.
And you don't find, and then that is in October, and she is never arrested after that time. For the rest of the time that you are involved in this case, she is never arrested.
That's correct.
Until I think you recently got back in the case, right?
Correct.
But until you were transferred out to the bomb squad, you never arrest Lynlee Renick after that conversation.
That's correct.
And you never call her back in for questioning, is that correct?
That was my last contact.
And you talk to it after that 10-5 conversation, you don't collect any more physical evidence, correct? I mean, until October of this year, and for the rest of the time that you're in the unit before it's being transferred out to the bomb squad, you never collect any more physical evidence.
I believe that's true.
Okay, you talked to Henry Padelford, right?
Paddleford, yes.
Padelford, he's corrected us and said it was Padelford, so, but I understand. But you talked to him, right?
Yes.
And he was the one who said, he was the one who told you that Michael Humphrey asked him, how do I get somebody to stop abusing their wife, right?
His statement was, I think, closer to you don't know how to get a guy to quit hitting you or something like that.
Okay, and then didn't Padelford also say that Michael was trying to have a sexual relationship with Lynlee?
He did.
Okay, and then you talked to Rachel Hunt, I think at the beginning of February.
I did talk to her.
Right, and she also denied, just like Ashley Shaw, having anything to do with this.
That's correct.
And then there's no more work, there's no more significant work done for the rest of the time that you're in the investigation unit at EDCC.
That's correct.
And the day after, so the day after Lynlee is not arrested, I want to back up a little bit. You try to, you talk to Ashley Shaw on 10-6, is that correct? The very next day, or somebody does. I think it's Corporal Haslag talks to Ashley Shaw, correct?
Yeah, I think Haslag talks to her.
Okay, and she denies, and that's also sort of a semi-interrogation of Ashley Shaw, right?
I don't remember.
Okay, because at this point, Lynlee Renick is your top suspect. Is that true?
It is.
Because of all the reasons. What?
Her and Michael, but yes.
Okay, but you don't know who did what.
That's true.
Okay, and you're not happy with her answers that took place at 10-5. You're not satisfied with her answers.
Right, she lied.
Okay, and so you talk to Ashley Shaw next, or somebody from your unit talks to Ashley Shaw, right?
Correct.
And you bring up the poisoning. That person brings up the poisoning with Ashley Shaw, right?
Okay.
Do you agree with that?
I don't remember Darren's interview. I wasn't present. Your Honor, I still want your watch.
Yeah.
And then after speaking with Haslag, you go and you talk to Michael Humphrey again on 10-18.
Yes, I interviewed him again.
Okay, and was there an incident that caused you to go interview him again on 10-16?
There was.
What was that incident?
There was a search warrant conducted at his residence.
His door was kicked in.
His door was kicked in.
And his door was kicked in by people by a specialized drug unit looking for drugs.
Yes.
And that was what caused you to go talk to him.
Yes.
I think you said, I saw a news article and I was like, that's my boy and I'm going to go holler at him. Do you recall saying that?
Yep, that's how I talked to Michael.
And you went and saw him because if he gave you favorable information in this homicide, you were going to drop those drug charges.
I was not going to drop those drug charges. I was going to talk to the prosecutor about them.
And what was what were you going to talk to the prosecutor about?
Him having a favorable charge, or lessening up the charges, obviously, so he would help with the murder investigation.
So in exchange for information, you were going to do him a favor or a solid by getting his charges reduced with the prosecutor.
Yes.
Okay, you were not going to reduce his charges you were going to reduce his charges precisely for the reason of him giving you favorable information on this homicide.
That is correct.
But he doesn't, right?
He does not.
You tell him that, and I think your partner tells him that if he's not the trigger puller, he's going to get probation, I think. If he was just involved in this but not the trigger puller, he would just get probation or a lighter sentence. Is that true?
I don't remember what Marcus told him.
Okay. But you guys don't force Michael Humphrey to give you a favorable statement or to accuse Lynlee Renick? Well, let me back up a little bit. You told Michael Humphrey that Lynlee was your chief suspect at that point, right?
I believe I did, yes.
Okay, so you say, Michael, Lynlee is our suspect, and we want information to help solve this. If you didn't pull the trigger, you're not going to go to prison for a long time, or you're going to get a lesser sentence. Is that true?
It is.
But Michael Humphrey, what's important to understand is he was free to reject that offer, right?
He was.
You didn't say to him, if you reject this offer, we're going to punish you, right?
Right.
I mean, you didn't tell him, Michael, we want information on this case, but if you don't give us information on the case, we're going to punish you, right? He had the option. Well, let me ask it this way. He didn't talk to you that day, right? Well, he talked to you, but he didn't give you the favorable statement, or he didn't accuse Lynlee Renick of murder at that point.
True.
And he was not punished for that, right?
Well, he was, because you just got convicted of
Not
first
at that
degree
time. When you walked out of his trailer after he said, once he said, I've got no information for you, you and your partner left his trailer, right?
We did.
Okay, and you didn't handcuff him or take him to jail at that point.
That's correct.
You didn't hurt him or, in any way at that point, right?
I never hurt him at all. So.
Answer my question, please. You didn't hurt him at that point, right?
I didn't hurt him at that point. No.
Okay. So he was free based on the statements you made. He had a choice. His choice could be help you out and he would get a deal, or plan B, do nothing and not be hurt or not be punished by you, right? He had a choice.
He did.
And he took the choice of not taking you up on your offer. He rejected your offer, right?
He did.
And I'll withdraw the question. Did you also find information that Michael had put programmed a woman named Ashley in his phone as James?
Yes.
Did you ever check into that and see whose number that was?
It was his girlfriend's number.
Well, he has a girlfriend named Ashley, but did you ever verify that?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I might have been looking at his phone when he was doing it, so
Okay,
it
but
made sense at the time.
He told you it was Ashley, his girlfriend, but you never, in fact, confirmed through phone records that it was, in fact, Ashley Armour, his girlfriend. That was the Ashley that he had in his phone. You never confirmed that with phone records.
That's correct.
And when you left that Michael Humphrey's trailer, Lynlee was still your chief suspect.
That's correct.
You had never, up until that point, really looked at Michael Humphrey as being the principal person in this. Is that true?
I'd put them together.
Okay, but you went to Michael Humphrey's trailer trying to get information on Lynlee, right?
Right.
You didn't go to Michael Humphrey's trailer interrogating him about him. You didn't go to Michael Humphrey's trailer and say that he was the chief suspect. You went to Michael Humphrey's trailer and said Lynlee was the chief suspect, right?
Correct.
And at this point, this is about the time where the case goes cold, right?
I wouldn't agree with the case going cold.
Okay. But at this point, the end of 2017, all right, you can still, even though Lynlee is your chief suspect, you can still only really say that Lynlee is involved, just like what you said at the 10-5 interview, right?
Right, we didn't have probable cause to arrest her at that time.
Okay. You're not clear who did what at that point.
I agree with that.
And there's a complete absence of Lynlee being a violent person. I mean, at that point, you had nobody coming forward to you telling you about any incident Lynlee had ever, or that they had witnessed themselves of Lynlee being violent.
That's true.
And you had no evidence at all. Nobody came forward with any direct firsthand knowledge of her having any proficiency in firearms, correct?
That's correct.
And her job was she was in the comfort business. Does that sound right? I mean, she was in the relaxation business essentially, right?
Yes.
She didn't have a violent job or a physical job, right? Well, maybe it was a physical job, but it wasn't a violent job. You would agree with that?
I would.
And whoever tried to pick up these shells only got half of them.
Correct.
And at that point, the gun had never been found.
Correct.
And the gun would eventually be found in Michael Humphrey's possession.
That's
or
correct.
Somebody that he knew. He led you to the gun.
Correct.
And there was no medical documentation that Ben had ever been actually poisoned.
That's correct.
There's no medical documentation that Ben ever went to the hospital or the doctors at all, right?
That's correct.
No organ damage or anything like that?
No, not that I know of.
Toxicology was negative?
Correct.
You never found Percocet residue anywhere on any things at the spa or anybody's house?
I did not.
Okay, you never went to the spa at all while it was still open, right? Except for that one time you interviewed Lynlee and Ashley, right?
That's correct.
And so you leave the Division of Drug and Crime Control with the belief Lynlee's involved, but you're not sure how. Is that fair?
I leave the Troop F unit thinking that, yes.
And there was Nathaniel, a Trooper Schaefer, that took the case over. Is that correct?
It is.
And I think you said that while you were, Trooper Schaefer was not in the unit when Ben was killed, right?
That's correct.
He came in, I think, in November of 2017. So he came into the unit, I think, or you know when exactly he started?
It might have been 2018.
Okay, so you've done a lot of work by the time he shows up, right?
That's accurate.
Okay, now he may have helped you out here or there, but he was not heavily involved in this investigation when you were between June and the fall of 10-5, right?
That's correct.
So everything that he knows about that case, he would have to read or research himself. He wouldn't have known that just by being there with you.
That's correct.
And do you know how much experience Nathaniel Schaefer had in homicide investigations when he came to the unit in November or January of 2018?
Typically, most state troopers don't have a lot of homicide investigative experience until they come to DCC. He did an internship and worked a double homicide with me at the lake and suspicious suicide with me during that internship.
Okay. He was an intern?
No, it's the wrong term. It's not the wrong term. You can do internships. I could go do an internship next month to be a pilot for a month in the patrol. He had done an internship within DDCC before coming to the unit.
Are investigators trained, Trooper, in jailhouse informants and how to handle jailhouse informants?
Some are.
You know what I'm talking about when I say jailhouse informant?
I'd be more comfortable if you would give a definition.
Okay. Well, people in jail technically don't want to be in jail, right?
True.
And so they may, and let's say prisoner X, hears some inside information on the yard or in the chow hall or something like that about inside information about a crime, which is a place where that may happen, right?
Correct.
And so, not knowing that police officers give deals and preferential treatment to people who can solve crimes for them, that jailhouse informant has his lawyer or a family member call a detective and has that person say that this person in jail has information that can solve a case. Does that happen?
I'm sure it does, yes.
And so that detective goes down and meets with this jailhouse informant, and the detective, before he gets the deal, the detective is going to want to know what this guy knows, right?
Right.
He's not just going to give him a deal because he says he knows what happens. There has to be an interview first, right?
Correct.
And so this jailhouse informant says, you know, I was with a cellmate and he confessed to me to robbing the First National Bank. And the detective is going to want to follow up and explore how he knows that, right? How this confession happened, right?
Right.
And so he's going to ask this jailhouse informant, how do you know that? And the jailhouse informant is going to use that precise, specific inside knowledge to corroborate that this person confessed to them, right?
Okay.
Okay, and then the detective thinks to himself, it may be possible that this detective thinks to himself, well, the police are the only ones that know, for example, the van was dumped at this corner of Elm and Main. We're the only one only the police and the person who robbed the bank, we're the only two people that would have that inside information. This guy, this jailhouse informant, must be telling the truth. That's an inference that a detective, an inexperienced detective may make, correct?
Correct.
But it's not true if he got that information from the trash or the chow hall or the shower room or something like that, right?
If he heard it from someone else.
Right.
And then, sure.
But he may not tell the police that's where he heard it. He may tell the police he heard it from a confession, because that's the scenario that's going to help him out.
Okay.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Corporal Foust, you talked about gunshot residue. Could you explain to the jury what gunshot residue is?
It's unspent powder from a casing. If it doesn't all burn up, it'll come out the end of the barrel.
Basically, you fire a gun, the bullet comes out, but some of this powder, you may not even see it comes out.
Correct.
And you can get it on you.
Yes.
And so you have gunshot residue tests to test someone.
Yes.
To see if they recently had a gun or fired a gun.
That's correct.
But you could also get it just by, if you fired a gun and we shook hands, I could get it on my hand, couldn't I?
Right.
But before you got to do this gunshot residue test on Lynlee, do you have any evidence about her removing potential gunshot residue evidence?
Yes.
Could you tell the jury how, if I have gunshot residue on my hands, how it might be easily removed?
You can wash your hands.
And what evidence do you have? I could actually just rub it on my clothes too, correct?
It might get by with that.
But tell the jury what evidence you have that if Ms. Renick had gunshot residue on her hands, the test you gave her that night would have been meaningless.
Right. We had witness statements from Ms. Shaw and Michael Humphrey and Rachel Hunt that she washed her hands. Is that what you mean?
What did she do after she committed this murder to defeat a gunshot residue test?
She washed her hands.
Well,
She scrubbed them in the Vichy shower or whatever that is.
They took a shower back there.
Right.
Now, I want to talk to you about Mike Scarlett, and do you believe Mike Scarlett is what we sometimes call a red herring in the case?
Yes.
Okay. And red herring is a term I use. What do you mean by that?
I believe he was not correct in what he said.
Because if he is actually, what does that indicate about Ms. Renick's guilt if he is correct?
It doesn't make sense if the timeline doesn't match up. So it would be, if the gunshots were the same gunshot, none of it adds up. It's not one shot, it's 8, and the time was not 3:30 or 4. It was 3:30 or 4, not 6. So do they shoot and then she screams, or does she find him and scream, but she already knows he's dead? Because whoever shot, she already knew he was dead. It doesn't make sense. Plus, I interviewed the guy he was with, and he didn't hear anything.
Well, and I hate to do this, but let's go briefly through the timeline of what really happened. There's a definitive time when Lynlee and Michael Humphrey left the Columbia area, correct?
There is.
What time is that?
Well, you're going to ask, I forget the time. But they got gas, so that helps a lot. I believe that was at 3 or 3:03 or something like that.
3:03 is correct.
So they leave the south end of Columbia off Scott Boulevard, take not too long to get down I-70, headed east, and then take, that's the 131 or 134 mile marker, run down to Montgomery County, another 50 or so miles maybe to the house.
Well, let's do this. At 3:03, they leave the gas station. Approximately how long does it take to drive out to where she murdered her husband?
Maybe 45 minutes.
And all indications are they were not out there murdering him very long.
Correct.
And they immediately returned back. time would they have returned back at the spa?
Say around 5.
And we haven't gone into it yet, the next witness will, but there's a series of phone calls and messages where Lynlee is back at the spa trying to gather up her children and go home and find out, my goodness, what happened to Ben, correct?
Correct.
So she's not out there.
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
All right, just a second.
I'll rephrase it. I'll rephrase it, Judge.
All right, question, but I'm talking to him.
Well, can we have a recess then, Your Honor, because I have to.
Well, that's what I was talking to him about. We're going to do that after this guy's done, okay? Is that all right with you? Ask your question. The question's been withdrawn, so's the objection.
And what time does the evidence seem to indicate that Miss Renick returned approximately back out at the crime scene?
6:30.
And that's based on when the 911 call happened, which happened at what time?
6:31. I think she called Sam at 6:31 first because he was right next door. He would have also been closer to hear a scream or a shot that late in the evening, along with the babysitters he was interviewing. And she'd call 911 right after that, so 6:31 or 2 or 3 or something.
And Mr. Scarlett heard how many shots?
I believe he said he heard one muffled shot, possibly a gunshot.
And he described it actually not being from a handgun, but from what type of gun?
Shotgun.
And he heard that either a little bit before 6 or a little bit after 6.
Yes.
And he heard the gunshot, and then how did he describe a woman screaming in relationship to the gunshot?
You heard it right after, and then he heard police and sirens.
And so he hears a gunshot, a little bit later he hears a woman scream, and then a little bit later he hears the police arriving in response to a 911 call.
That's correct.
And so if that gunshot was involved in this homicide, it indicates to you as a trained investigator who was out there at the crime scene when that gunshot went off.
She would have been.
The person calling 911.
Right.
And who called 911?
She did. Lynlee.
And so in fairness to her, you don't believe that. You believe the murder happened earlier. As part of
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
I'll rephrase. As part of your investigation, do you believe the murder happened
I'm sorry,
earlier?
say that again.
Ask your question. As part of your investigation, do you believe the murder happened earlier?
I do.
Now, if you're going out to this location, it's somewhat rural, correct?
Yes.
Not a lot of people would be around during the day.
Right.
And if you were to want to murder somebody there, you might want to find out if there would be any strangers or individuals out there at a certain time to avoid them so they didn't see you commit murder, correct?
Yes.
Who asked Ben the day before he was murdered about the rat supply schedule?
Lynlee asked when the rota supplier came out.
And so the day before Ben is murdered, Lynlee asked Ben, when does the rat supplier come out?
Correct.
And do you remember his response actually?
I think he said, I forget the day, maybe Wednesday at 1 or noon, and he said why.
He asked why. Now, the food poisoning, according to the text messages in the defense exhibit, the conversation relating to he and Lynlee supposedly being food poisoned was May 24th.
Yes.
And that's approximately just over 2 weeks prior to the day he was actually murdered.
Correct.
You spoke with Mr. Hessman about a bunch of motives that Ms. Renick had. I wanted to be clear about those. He didn't phrase them that way, but do people kill their spouses because of affairs they're involved in? Has that been your training experience?
Yes.
Do people kill their spouses for sums of money?
Yes.
And in this case, there's a snake transaction and life insurance policy we're going to talk about. There was significant. Would you consider what you know about those money to be a significant amount of monies?
Yes.
In your training experience, have people killed their spouses for much, much less money than we're talking about here today?
Yes.
And finally, according to the text message, and we're going to show some of them later ourselves, but there was concerns about Ben shutting down and not providing financial backing of Lynlee's dream spa, correct?
Correct.
Do you believe that could be a motive?
Yes.
Now, the last thing I want to ask you, can you stand up for a second? We've heard his name a couple of times, but who is that fellow?
That's Ben's brother, Sam.
That's Sam Pace. Yes. In all these interviews you had with Ms. Renick, how many were there?
I believe I interviewed her 6 times.
And in these 6 times, did she ever once tell you that she was present when Michael Humphrey shot and killed her husband?
She did not.
Mr. Heston just asked you a couple of names, a couple more red areas. He's Jeff Marzella, Brian Higginbotham, people, names that he suspects, I guess, of having committed this crime. Remember that?
I do.
Okay. During these 6 interviews, when Miss Renick did not tell you she was standing next to her husband when her ex-boyfriend shot him in the back of the head, in those 6 interviews, did she give you a name of somebody you should in fact investigate?
She did.
Who is that?
Sam.
The dead man's brother? I don't have any other questions. Recalls.
Trooper, she also told you that you were asking her who could have done this on 10-5, correct?
Correct.
And didn't she also tell you that she just didn't want to throw a name out there?
I don't remember.
Okay. And when she said that she suspected Sam of doing this, that was directly in a response to your question, right?
She said his name several times in different interviews.
Okay. Now, Mike Scarlett. Could Mike Scarlett have heard a gunshot, heard a scream, and just been mistaken about the time of day it happened? Isn't that something that could have happened?
Yes.
People kill their husbands for money, right?
Right?
They kill their husbands because they snore too loudly sometimes, I bet, right?
Maybe.
They kill their husbands for all kinds of reasons.
Sure.
We could go down the alphabet, and every motive that exists, somebody has probably been murdered for that motive, right?
Right.
Don't people also divorce their spouses over money?
Yes.
Don't people also divorce their spouses because of affairs?
Yes.
Don't the motives that apply to murder just as equally apply to reasons for divorcing your spouse?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to tell you, we both agree Lynlee Renick covered up her involvement in this, okay? You know that, right?
Right.
But Rachel Hunt also covered up her knowledge of the murder, correct? Or she also covered up her knowledge, right?
That's correct.
And she had nothing to do with this, or she was not involved in any way, right?
Correct.
And she still covered it up, right?
She did.
So you can cover up a murder for a lot of reasons other than being guilty of the murder, right?
Yes.
You can cover up the murder because you just don't want to be involved in it, right?
That's right.
You can cover up the murder because you're afraid that if you admit to being involved in it, or if you admit to having knowledge of it, the police may arrest you for it, right?
That's correct.
And you may cover up the murder because you're afraid that if you give information about the murder, the actual murderer will find you and kill you, right? Or you're afraid of the person, right?
Right.
So you can have motives for murder that apply to divorce, right?
Right.
And you can have, you can cover up a murder and not be involved in the murder, right?
Correct.
So finally, covering up a murder and having a motive to murder, because it fits both scenario, cannot be proof of a murder, right?
You lost me.
A motive to murder somebody, because it can just as equally be applied to a motive divorce, means that you can't say that that motive applies to one or the other. It could apply to both.
It could apply to both.
And if it applies to both, and you can't figure out, divorce is not illegal, right?
Right.
Murder is illegal, right?
Right.
So having a motive is not proof that you're going to commit a murder, right?
Right.
Because it also could apply to divorce, right?
Right.
If you pull up to a T intersection and there's a liquor store on that side and your job is on that side and you're at this intersection, you could go that way or that way. Just being at that intersection is not proof that you're going to the liquor store, and it's not proof that you're going that way. You could go. It could apply to either one, right?
Right.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Yeah, you redirect? No, you're not. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our morning recess. I need to read this to you again. You can go ahead and stay. Is he finally excused?
Okay, you recall, Your Honor.
All right, you're subject to recall. You can step down.